Hello you wonderful Godot people. In this video we're going to learn how to make a local multiplayer game with split screen where every character has its own camera that can move around. We're going to make a very simple one. This is just a quick introduction. You'll notice I haven't got any collision going right now. These are very basic sprites, but this should help you make local multiplayer games with split screen. Okay, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a player. I've got some sprites ready. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to make the most simple character possible. I'm just going to make a sprite as my basic character. I'm not going to worry about collisions or anything like that because I'm not making a full game. I just want to show you how to get the movement working for local multiplayer and how to get split screen working. So let's start with a base node, and I'm going to have my base node of a sprite. I've already typed it in here from when I was doing my prototype. There's my sprite, and I've got my 4 versions of the toucan logo here, so I'm just going to drop this one in, and yeah, that'll do. And I'm going to call this player. Awesome. Let's save this. I'm going to make a brand new folder, so that was just Control S for save, brand new folder, and I'm going to call this player. Check my typing. And good to go. Now, I also want a new script, so I'm going to put a new script in the same scene, player.gd, empty template is fine, and great. While we're here, let's put in a constant. I'm going to call it speed, and 200 seems to work for now, but we can always tweak it for whatever we need. I want 4 different players going, so let's make something called level. That's going to be a 2D scene. I'm going to call this level, and instance in our player. Player should be saved. Great. So I'm just going to instance in player. It's the only scene we've got. There's my player. I want 4 of these, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to player, and go to new inherited scene. I'm going to inherit from, so open base scene, player. I'm going to call this player 2, and it's going to be the exact same thing, but the sprite is going to have a different icon. I'm going to save that as player 2, and just do the same thing. Go to player, new inherited scene, make sure player is selected. You don't have to go to the player scene before you do new inherited scene, but it does mean that that's going to be the default selection, so it just makes things a little bit easier. This is player 3. And I'm going to change the sprite, which I'm going to do by selecting it and then dragging it in. Well done, Jan. Boop. And one more time. Let's select player, new inherited scene, inheriting from player. And let's bring in canopy white. Awesome. So why have I done that? It's because now any change I make to player 1 will propagate to all 4 players. And on this level, let's bring in the grid snap and move this to here. There we go. And I'm going to instance in player 2. About there. And I'm going to go back here and instance in player 3. Doesn't really matter where they go. And I'm going to instance in player 4. Awesome. It's pretty simple. Nothing's going to happen. It looks like we're playing Pogs. Let's save the scene. So Control S. I'm going to go back up a level. Right click. Call this level. And level. Before we make the script, let's put in our inputs. And I want to do this in a specific way. So we're going to project settings. I'm going to go to input map. And let's add in player _1 _up. Now, I want to keep this format. So player _number _directions. I'm going to go up, right, down, left. So I'm just going to add that by pressing enter. 1, player 1, down. Normally I would fast forward this, but actually it's probably a good idea to show what I'm doing. Great, so that's 1 player done. I'm going to do this again with the other 3 players. So player 2 up, and one more time, player 4 up, player 4 right, player 4 down, and player 4 left. Great. So all I need to do is type in the thing, press enter, and then move on to the next one. Or press return, move on to the next one. I don't have to keep going up and down to move the mouse. However, now I need to put the keys in. Now I'm using a QWERTY keyboard. If you're using AZERTY, your keys are going to be a little bit different. So I'm just going to add key, and player 1's going to be W for up, D for right, S for down, and A for left. Player 2, let's give you, what's up going to be? Up can be I, right can be L, down can be K, and Jacoby left. Great, I'm just going to keep setting these up. So I'm going to use the cursor arrows for these. Now this will still work with a controller or a joystick. I'm just using keyboard for now to make it nice and simple. And on the keypad. Great, so all 4 players will be around the same keyboard. Hopefully I don't have any major spelling mistakes. It looks good to me so far. I can always fix it later. Okay, so we have the inputs made. Let's go into the player scene and let's give this a script. We've got our constant for the speed. I also want an export variable. And this is going to be, you know what, let's type it just to make sure that we know what this is. This is an integer. And it's a variable. And we're going to call this ID. Okay, so all players have an export variable called ID, which can only be an integer. That's very important. So the default for that is going to be 1. And now I can go to the other players and just set those. So yours is 2. Yours is 3. And yours is 4. So now, when I go to the level scene, which I'm just going to move to over here to be a little less confusing, and you should see that they're not. And the reason they're not is because I instanced them before I wrote that export variable. So let's just put them to default and they should be fine. Great. So if you're seeing them as 0, even though you've set them in the main scene, go over here, press the default, and it'll go to whatever the default for that scene is. So we have 4 players with their own ID. Okay, so how are we going to make this work? Well, I'm going to run this on the process. So let's go over to player, and I'm going to go function process. Now you could use this on process, you could use this on input. It doesn't really matter which way you're doing it, the technique's going to be the same. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a new variable called movement. And this is a vector2, and I'm just going to make it a blank vector2. So it's a vector2 0. Now let's set the movement on the x-axis, the left and right axis. That's going to be equal to input.getActionStrength. GetActionStrength is going to, oh, there's a typo. GetActionStrength is going to return a value between -1 and 1. Let's fix our typo. So project settings, I knew there'd be one. There you are. And to fix that, I'm going to double click on it and change this dash for an underscore. Any others like that? So you'll notice that what we have is a name here, which is a string, and then the corresponding key. So what's going to happen is when I press the key A, that can be called player input player 1 left, which is a string. Now that's interesting because what that means is we can do this. Player 1, we're going left and right, aren't we? So let's go right. But I can change the 1 here for $S. Right, that's the control code for take this number and put it as a string. And then here, inside the bracket, but after the quotation mark, I can go $, and call that ID. So whatever the value of ID is, goes here. So if you're player 1 right. If you're player 2 right, and so on. Now to make this work properly, what I'm going to do is subtract input.getActionStrength. And that's going to be player, put that %S in there, and that's going to be ID. Okay, so let's copy that. I'm going to do Control-D to duplicate it. And we're going to make a few changes. First change, number 1. This is now on Y. And for change number 2, this is not right. This is up. And change number 3, this is not left. This is down. Okay, let's now say take movement, and we're going to multiply it by. So multiply equals. That means it is itself multiplied by. And that's going to be speed multiplied by delta. Why am I multiplying by delta? Well, delta, which is right here, is the time between frames, which is going to be different on different machines. So if I take the time between frames and multiply the speed by that, it's going to be the same on slower and faster machines. That's a great way of making sure your game is not going to run much slower on older machines. Okay, then I'm going to take my global position, and I'm going to add in movement. Now, this will work, but we're going to have to do one more step. But before I show you that step, let's just go to our level and run it. We need to define our scene. Level could be scene. Great. And I should have put a camera in this, shouldn't I? Let's put a camera in it. Camera. Camera 2D, you could be current, and you know what, let's zoom you out by 3 just to make this nice and easy. Hello again, glorious Godot people, Jan from the future here. I said there was one more thing we're going to add, and then I forgot to add it. The thing we need to add is normalize movement. So movement is equal to movement dot. And the reason we're going to do that, and don't worry about what you're about to see, that's from later on in the video, is because otherwise when we move diagonally, we will move faster. So it's going to get rid of that. It's going to make all 8 directions, or all possible directions, go at the same speed. So we're going to make sure that we can normalize our movement. And back to present day Jan. Before we get any further, one thing I should check, remember remember the y-axis is different in 2D than 3D. I'm so used to 3D now, I've forgotten that positive y is down. So I need to go to my movement.y and just change that to down, subtract up. Okay, so we've set that. Let's take a look how it looks. I can move this character, I can move that character independently. I don't have enough fingers to move this one as well, but they will move. And this will move. And we can speed this up, right? So we can say 200 is too slow, make it 400. Doesn't really matter what values you pick. And they should now move a little bit faster. Great. Okay, so we have that going. To do the next bit, I just need to put in a quick little placeholder level. So let's make a quick tile map. This is a very rough and ready tile map because I don't have any collisions or anything, but just so we can see when characters are moving. Otherwise, it's going to feel really weird. So new tile set, and I'm going to bring in my black square and my white square, which is actually gray, but I called it white. And let's edit. So I'm going to make a new single tile, and I want the region. So let's just put my grids on. That's the whole region. Great. New single tile. Great. So let's just check. Both of those are there. Bring you back. And now we can start drawing our tile map. So I'm going to zoom out and just do a random shape. So blue, 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 just so we have something we can see. That's a weird shape, but fine. And I'm going to take this one and let's go over to fill. Boop. And now, the reason I can't see my characters is the tile map is below them in the node tree, so let's just move it up to the top. Awesome. And we can put in a few more walls. So let's just go back to drawing mode. And I don't know, just do some random things here. It's kind of a smiley face. Let's just go in for the smiley face. Awesome. All right, so now when I go into my level, I can now move 4 characters independently on the same keyboard with the same script. Okay, that's done. Let's start looking at split screen. So we have our player scenes here, we have our level, but the split screen is going to need a new instance of the level for every part of the screen. So I'm going to make a new scene, and this is going to be a user interface. Let's call this split screen. And let's save that in its own folder or in level. What do you think? Yeah, level will be fine. It's part of the level, I guess. No, it's not. Let's save that in its own folder. I'm going to call this split screen. Splitscreen.tscn, and there it is. Great. Make sure this is set to full rectangle, and I want the anchors in all 4 corners. I can actually see them. If you can't see the anchors, make sure you've got the helpers on. I can see them, so that's where they go. Okay. For split screen to work, we're going to make use of how Godot uses containers. Specifically, there are a few we can use. So if I type in container, we have the HBox container, the VBox container, and the grid container. These are the 3 that are going to be great for us. Now, the way these work is if I put, let's say, an HBox container here. So what the HBox container is going to do is going to take all of its child nodes and order them. So in this case, horizontally, so they'll go along this way, but by the order that they're in underneath. So child 0 will be on the left, child 1 will be just to the right of it, and the final child will be over the far right. I'm actually not going to use an HBox container. I'm going to use a grid container. So as a child of split screen, let's go grid, and I'll set my columns to 2. And I want this full rect and anchors at full rect as well. Great. Okay, so underneath the grid container, I'm going to put a single viewport container. Now these can be a little fiddly to set up, so we're going to do this very carefully. My viewport container is going to be stretched. This means the view underneath should be stretched to the available space. That's very important. I also want, under size flags, to make sure I've got expand in both directions. So it's going to fill all available space. Now you'll notice it's only filling half the space, but that's because I told the grid container to have 2 columns. If I say, okay, duplicate this, so Control D, we now have 2 of them. And if I duplicate that, look at that. So it's automatically sorting them out in the direction we want. For now, I don't want all of those. I'm going to make a single viewport container, then I'm going to save it as a scene and bring it in. A viewport container needs a viewport, and that's going to be the thing that controls the view. So far, so good. And that's going to need a camera. Boom. Now, you'll see right here that we have an error, and our error says you must have a size greater than 0 to render anything. Good advice. Let's give it a nice big size, 1024 by 768. I may have to fix that. These are fiddly. One more thing I need to do is I need to bring in the level. So I'm just going to instance in level as a child of the viewport container. Now, right now I don't see anything, so I'm going to leave the screen and come back, and it's visible. Why do I have to leave the screen and come back? I need to leave the screen and come back because sometimes Godot doesn't update control mode. So if you see nothing, just leave and come back. It should reload it. You'll also find that you might have to play with stretch shrink up and down to get that size right. But now we have this going well. We also have a camera here. Let's go into our let's go to our level scene and remove that camera. It's going to confuse everything. So bye-bye camera. And back, and save that, and back to split screen. And this camera is going to have a zoom of 3, just like the other one. And I'm going to make that current. I'm also going to make sure that this is now our default scene. So I'm going to go Project, Project Settings, under Application, under Run, see where it says Main Scene? Click this icon, and we're just going to find the scene we want. So under Split Screen, splitscreen.tscn, boom. So now when I run this scene, we've got this view right here. Now the camera isn't following anything, we'll do that in a minute. But what we could do is we could take this, and I'm just going to go Duplicate, which is Control D, 1, 2, 3 times, run that, make this nice and big, and we now have 4 views. Now, these 4 views are identical. The camera isn't moving, so we need a little bit of scripting, but so far so good. So the first bit of scripting I want to do is going to be within the level. So let's go to the level and give that a script. I'm going to do this quite simply. I'm just going to onReady variable, onReady var, player 1. It should be like that. I'm using capital P for player because it's referring to a node, and that's just the player. Let's duplicate that. So Control D, 1, 2, 3, and 2. I realize I should be typing this, but I do too many typos. 2, 3, 4, great. Okay, so the level now has a reference to each player. Great. Let's go back to our split screen. And I want the grid container to tell the viewport, here's your ID. I'm going to use the IDs in a minute. So first, let's make a script for grid container. And I just want a simple ready function. So function ready for I in get child count. So all this is saying is count the number of direct children you are. So for I in 0, 1, 2. So for I in that many children, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get child I. And it's going to have something called player ID. It doesn't yet, but it's going to. Is equal to I. Be careful, because this is going to start at 0, and we don't have a player ID 0. So I'm going to add 1. I don't want an off by 1 error. Okay, so that's all it's going to do. Now, let's go to our viewport containers, and we'll delete 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to right-click on this. I'm going to go Save Branch as Scene. And it's going to go on to split screen, and it's going to be called Viewport Container TSCN. I should probably rename it, but that's actually a good name for it. And there it is. So now I can go and edit this scene, and any changes I make will happen on all 4, which is what I want. All right, so let's give our viewport container a script. And we've got to have player ID. Great. This is going to be an integer. Let's make a function, and I'm going to call this update camera. Now I don't want to call the function from the parent script because it's not really the parent script's job. It's just going to change this integer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use setGet. And all setGet's going to do is say whenever this is changed, run this function, update camera. Okay, so every time player ID is changed in this script, it's going to run update camera. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to put a little script in the camera. So let's go to our camera and let's give this a brand new script. It's going to go in split screen, that's fine. Camera 2D, awesome. I'm going to give this a variable called target, that's the thing it's going to follow. And then I'm going to run this on process. So every frame I want you to do the following. In fact, we're not going to use delta, so I'm just going to give that an underscore. And I'm going to say if target is equal to null, return. All this is going to do is say, if you haven't been set yet, then just stop trying to run the script. I don't want you trying to find your target if you don't know what your target is. If that hasn't happened, then I'm just going to set my position to be equal to the target position. Great. So now all I need to do is change target. Well, easy enough. Let's go back to our viewport script, and I'm going to do target ID as a variable. So there's my target ID, and now I'm going to use match. I'm going to match ID. So whatever value this is, do something. Okay, so if it's 1, then I want you to go to your camera and find the target. I should have actually saved that so it autocompletes. Let's try that again. Find the target, and I want you to set it to level.player1. And I'm just going to repeat this for 2, 3, and 4. So 2, you know what? I could probably just duplicate this, use Alt and down arrow, and just change player 1 to player 2. And then 3 is the same deal. So duplicate, Alt and down, player 3. And 4, same deal, duplicate, player 4. And that should be everything. Let's see if I've got this right. So I've got my one there, and it's moving around. Now, so far, I've just got half a screen full. Let's make this actually work. I'm going to go to my split screen. I'm going to get my viewport container. I'm going to press Control D 1, 2, 3 times. I'm going to press play. I'm going to embiggen the screen. Look at this. Now, there's no collision here, right? So we can go through walls, we can go through each other. But let's move player, whatever number this is. We now have some lovely dancing pogs all over a split screen. Now, I hope this has been helpful. We do have a bunch of tutorials, paid and free, so head over to canopy.games if you want to check out what else we can do. And let me know what you make out of this. I'm really curious to see your projects. Comment if you found this useful. Comment if you found this wrong. I know there's a bunch of optimizations I could have made. Let me know if this is too simple, too difficult. Basically, have fun, and I will see you in the next video.